Good evening and welcome to Messages of Hope. I'm Jill Lublin, your host. I'm the author of 3 books, the first one being Guerrilla Publicity, the second one is Networking Magic, and my third book on McGraw-Hill is Get Noticed, Get Referrals. Tonight we have a wonderful and inspiring another message of hope with Jonathan Kathrein. I hope I said that right.
You did.
Oh, good.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. And Jonathan is the executive director of
Future Leaders for Peace.
Future Leaders for Peace. I love that. So Jonathan, first of all, welcome.
Thank you.
Glad you're here.
I'm glad to be here.
You know, I'm definitely glad you're here because I understand that we almost didn't have you here. What I mean is you got bitten by a shark?
Yeah, in 1998 I was attacked by a great white shark at Stinson Beach. So it was a big life-changing experience, and I am lucky to be here. And
No
it turns
kidding.
out that the shark missed my femoral artery by about that far, so just a few centimeters. And had it hit that, I wouldn't be here.
You were out boogie boarding. What were you doing?
I was learning how to surf, so I started with a boogie board, which is a board that's just a few feet long, a few feet wide, and it's about half the size of a surfboard. And I was using that in the water to catch waves with a friend on the last day of summer vacation.
You were 16?
16, and I had driven myself to the beach that day. And my parents, of course, were more worried about me crashing my car on the way to the beach. But
who would have thought you'd be attacked by a shark, right?
Yeah, it was the first attack at Stinson Beach. So I found myself in the water alone and was paddling, watching my friend walk on the beach, and hit something with my right hand, and it was just under the surface of the water. And there's such powerful predators that I had turned to look and see what was there and actually couldn't see anything. And a few seconds later, the shark circled around. It came back. I still didn't know what it was, and it bit onto my right leg.
Wow.
And it lifted me up, and it flipped me over and started swimming with me underwater.
Oh,
and
my
was
God.
dragging me along the side of it. And I reached my arms out to grab around the stomach of it and couldn't. And I opened my eyes and just saw right in front of me were these big gills. And the gills are right along the side of the shark's, sort of where their neck would be. And they breathe through the gills. And I grabbed onto the gills and the shark let go. And I came to the surface and still had my board attached to my wrist by a leash, and grabbed that board and got back into the beach. And my life changed. With
your leg mangled, I'm sure, right? And that's the only part of you he had, but I'm sure he intended to get more. Is that true?
It was one big bite,
Wow.
and the jaw went from my knee to my hip. The scar covers that whole length, and it looks like a shark bite. It was one clean bite, and it held on tight and swam with me underwater. And so when I did come to the surface and tried to swim into shore, I couldn't use my right leg. I didn't look to see what was wrong with it. I knew it was there, but I couldn't use it, and just swam in with, without the use of that leg. And when I got to the beach, I needed help getting up on the sand and couldn't stand or couldn't walk. So I was carried up the beach.
Do you remember thinking anything? Was it all just sheer instinct? What was going through your mind?
There was definitely a lot of instinct involved in trying to get out of the water before the shark. I knew something was in the water after I hit it, and I was trying to get out of the water before the shark came back. Once it came back, something that I think people have pointed out to me since the attack was, rather than fighting it, I tried to hold on. It was too big to get away from and to push away. And it's an interesting, I think, it's a metaphor I've taken for other elements of my life, where I embraced it and I held on to it, and in doing that, it let go. And
Wow.
so it was really just trying to do what I could, and I managed to get pretty lucky and escaped. And
Yeah.
got to shore before it decided it was going to take another bite.
Wow.
Now, as far as sharks go, I'm pretty convinced it was not trying to eat me, because I think if it wanted to, it could have. But when you're in the shark's mouth, it doesn't really make much difference to you on the receiving end, whether it's trying to eat you or just see what you are.
Or just curious.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
you think that's really all it was, just seeing what you were?
I'm pretty convinced.
Wow.
I do quite a bit of surfing, and I still surf. And when you go to the beach and you see hundreds of people in the water, if you imagine a great white shark could come up and attack any one of those people, and they don't. And there are about 2 attacks on the West Coast every year, and most of those people survive. I'm pretty convinced that if the sharks wanted to eat people, they would, and it wouldn't even be a challenge. We can't swim as fast as a seal, and they can catch a seal.
Yeah.
So I think that it wanted to find out what I was, and it may have actually just been angry that I'd hit it first.
Ah, well, good instincts is all I can say, but you also had quite a bit of recovery time from that.
Yeah, it was a week in the hospital. It was about a month on the couch at home. So I missed a month of school, the beginning of my junior year in high school.
Now, did that upset you?
It didn't for the first few days, but after sitting on the couch for a month, it got pretty boring, and I was pretty eager to go back.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. And you mentioned to me before the show that you have to constantly, 10 years later even, really watch yourself and take good care of your leg and work out and do different things to keep yourself strong.
Yeah, it's a lot of stretching, a lot of running, swimming. Basically, I need to keep my legs strong, and that keeps the muscles working properly. And so I try to run every day before work. It's a challenge to do that, and with the weather as it's been pretty cold, it's a little harder to do, but it takes attention every day, without a doubt. And it's been 10 years. So when someone asks how long has the recovery been, it was a really tough 6 months, and then it was another 6 months of slightly easier recovery, and it sort of progressed like that. And even at 10 years, you know, I'm as strong as I can be. I can do any exercise or activity that I want to do. I can snowboard, I can surf, I can play basketball, but I still have to pay a lot of attention to it.
Sure. Well, you mentioned it was a life-changing activity. What changed?
My relationships changed. My appreciation for my relationships changed quite a bit. As I walked out of the house the morning that I was attacked, I had my driver's license in hand and was pretty proud to drive myself to the beach, and said goodbye to my mom as I walked out of the front door. And she said goodbye, and I turned and I said, "Bye, Mom, I love you." And I walked out the door. And then I felt like I was missing something, so I came back and opened the door, and I said, "Goodbye, Mom, I love you," and I shut the door again. Stepped just a few feet when I thought I was missing something again, came back and said it. And I said it a total of 3 times before I left.
Was that unusual?
Well, I wouldn't have ever told my high school friends that I said, "I love you." First of all, that's one of those things that I was uncomfortable with at the time, having a close family, having a loving family. So it was something that I wouldn't have advertised. I also wouldn't have done it 3 times. Once is probably enough. But I felt like something was missing. And I didn't know, but 2 hours later, I was 2 or 3 centimeters from never seeing her again. And that's just because how close the shark's bite was to my main artery. I may have never seen her again. So later I realized how close I was to losing that relationship with my mom, and I would have lost the relationships I had with everybody else had I died that day. And so I appreciate those relationships much more. I think that's one of the biggest things.
Yeah.
Another thing I learned was that you need to never give up. And that if you don't give up, that you can accomplish just about anything. And I apply that in Future Leaders for Peace. You know, I've been doing this work inspiring young kids now, primarily in the middle school age, for about 4 years. In the first year, most people figured it wasn't going to succeed. In the second year, some people started to believe, but most people didn't. And now I have a team, I have a staff, I have volunteers, and it's the same with the shark. Had I given up and let myself, you know, just be eaten or drowned or whatever it was, I wouldn't have ever made it back to the beach. And it's true in all parts of our life.
I love the shark analogy to your life and how powerful that is. And it seems like you've never given up anything. I love when you said that you embrace the shark and then it let go, right?
Right.
So now you all of a sudden you found yourself drawn to start this nonprofit organization. Why work with kids? What's that about?
I think every kid, every person has a shark in their life. And it was something that I battled a lot. And in my case, you know, it's basically talking and sharing about the shark. I ended up having so many people ask me, what that experience was like, that it was a chance for me to get it off of my chest and to share it with, in sharing it with other people. And I realized that every kid has something like that, whether it's a learning disability, whether it's a problem at home, a problem at school, being picked on by their peers. Everybody has something and they need that escape, and it's sometimes too difficult to share it with a parent or a teacher. And in my case, it was, you know, someone would come up to me on the street because they knew the story. It was someone I didn't know at school, or a new teacher that wasn't actually one of my teachers, and I was sharing it with strangers in a funny way. And then but I did build relationships with a lot of those people. And so when we go into schools, it's sharing with, we bring in college students, and it's sharing, the kids are sharing their experiences with these college-age mentors, and it's a chance to get something off their chest and have a positive role model help reinforce them and sort of send them in the right direction. So it was that sharing that I learned, and I apply that in our work.
Well, I want to go back to that, but there's something that's interesting to me, because you had this shark attack and all of a sudden you're in the middle of a bunch of media attention, because it was the first shark attack, right?
Right, right.
And weren't you on like Dateline NBC, and you had all these media appearances, we'll call them, and
right.
how'd you handle that?
It was a funny thing. I was a relatively shy kid. Most of my friends probably wouldn't say I'm as shy now, but I was relatively shy, and it was something that I may have never realized that I was able to speak to kids or speak to an audience had this experience not happened, or it may have taken a long time. Since I've spoken live to audiences of almost 1,000 kids at a time, and never thought I could have done something like that. So that was a big learning experience.
Yes.
The other thing was that there was a difference in my mind between the shows that wanted to focus on the shark and the shows that wanted to focus on educating people. And when I could, I always focused on something that educated others. And whether it was Dateline, but also the Discovery Channel and National Geographic, the ones that weren't just trying to, you know, glamorize the whole situation, but they were really trying to actually teach something. And as I taught about the shark, I realized I could take that shark lesson and teach more other things.
So you've actually taken a shark attack and now made it we'll call it a metaphor for life, right?
Right.
And tell us some of the metaphors that you've come up with. I got the embracing. What else? What else does the shark represent?
The shark represents some things, but you know, some of these things you look at just you know, life experiences, and I learned, actually I had a funny experience. It's not funny, but was fortunate enough to survive an armed robbery. I was working at a coffee shop in Berkeley as I was finishing college, and had two guys come in with handguns at about 5:30 in the morning. And one of the things that I learned in that situation, which was just as I was starting Future Leaders for Peace, was that the way that I treated those two men, they mirrored almost exactly to me. And
what do you mean by that?
Well, emotion is contagious. So if I come into a room and I'm smiling and I'm friendly, then the people in that room are more likely to smile in return.
Yes.
You can take it, believe it or not, it does work with armed robbers. I've tried it. It also works if you get in the car and you're a middle school kid and you get in the car at the end of the day with your mom or your dad or your grandma. And whoever it is, you get in the car with that person, or you walk in the front door, and if you're friendly, then they're more likely to be friendly in return. And it goes in both directions, but someone has to start it.
Yeah, so you were friendly with the armed robbers?
I was as friendly as I could have been. No, I actually, I was in the basement stocking the shelves, and I had three options. When I saw these guys coming down the stairs, I realized I could run, but I was in a basement. I could fight the guys, and most kids who like to play, you know, these crazy video games think that that's a pretty realistic option. But I can tell you that two guys with loaded guns, there's no way I was going to fight them. And the third is to actually treat them the way I wanted to be treated, or to model the behavior I wanted them to have. I started to take deep breaths to calm myself down. I smiled, and I was positive in the way that I interacted with them, and polite. And they lowered their guns. They did take money from the store, but they didn't take anything from me.
Wow.
They didn't take anything from the two people that were working there. But I was very conscious about the way I was interacting with them.
So you didn't escalate it?
Right.